I remember that I first heard about Craigslist from a friend, and that even at the time I'd thought of it as the perfect solution to my little problem. The way he explained it was that the site could be used in a manner similar to eBay, where you could advertise both goods and services and set a price. I had tried similar sites before, and obviously had a lot of experience with trying to sell my stuff online and in person, but Craigslist was certainly the best and most effective option for me. The reason Craigslist worked so well, especially for me as a vendor or seller, was that everyone on there, in the opposite role, i.e. as a buyer, was searching for the best price, and instantly attracted to a great deal, like a moth pulled toward a flame or an insect to the lure of nectar. Now, before you get the wrong idea, I'm not one of those freaks who would advertise something that was too good to be true with the intention of getting the prospective buyer to come pick it up. I'd read stories about those sorts of people. Those types would use sites like Craigslist as honey traps, a mechanism for enticing people to their homes or to some deserted location so that they could then have their way with them. That was not me. I never asked anyone to come to my home or to personally pick up a package, and I certainly never used the products I was selling as bait, not to mention the fact that the majority of my products would be far too big for individuals to just come and collect by hand or with a normal car. You see, my business was in furniture. Now, we're not talking about your run-of-the-mill sofas and office chairs, the sort of thing that you can pick up from some big department store or warehouse outlet. My dealing was in antique period furniture, ornate and often finely decorated wood-carved pieces, fine examples from renowned artists and craftsmen, or unique one-of-a-kind items that could be found nowhere else. A tip you can have for free is that you can always tell when a piece of furniture is likely to be expensive, because the people discussing it stops referring to it as what it actually is. A chair is no longer a chair. A table is no longer a table. Instead, these people use the words piece, item, or work to describe the furniture as if each individual stool was about to be framed and stuck up on the wall in some gallery or other. Either that, or they will use the name of the designer, carpenter, or company to refer to it. Nobody buying from me would refer to an 18th century Chaganli polished mahogany table as a table, or a Vicente chair as just a chair. They would ask, "How much for the Chaganli?" Or, "What would you want for that charming Vicente piece?" In short, the customers I dealt with in real life were filthy rich, outrageously pretentious, and often insufferably boring. This is why I hated working with them and loved giving their pieces away for a fraction of what they actually cost. And because my business involved such bulky items, I would even pay for the transportation and shipping of the goods out of my own pocket, saving the customer often hundreds and in some cases closer to thousands of dollars. The problem, you see, was that after a while I needed to clear the stuff out. When my friend first explained Craigslist to me, there was one phrase that really got me to pay attention. His exact words were, "It's a great way of getting rid of stuff you don't want anymore." That phrase really stuck with me, and it proved to be right. What I explained to my friend was that if I got too many pieces unsold, in the warehouse or my small shop, then the place would become overcrowded and cramped. More than that, having too many pieces were actually bad for business, because it prevented people from seeing the other pieces clearly. Sort of a can't see the wood for the trees situation, though more like, can't see that very expensive piece, because this less expensive piece is blocking the view. In reality, it was actually very easy to get rid of the things that were cluttering up my shop. I just put the stuff up at a ridiculously low, too good to be true price, and then waited for the punters to take them off my hands. My first post on Craigslist nearly gave my friend a heart attack. It was a 1740 King Louis table that had just been fully restored that I offered to sell for $100. It was worth around $12,000. The hilarious thing was that the shipping alone was going to cost $800, and the guy I sold it to actually had the cheek to ask if I'd knock it down to $75, which I promptly did. I never sold from the same account twice, but kept setting up new accounts for every sale. Nowadays you can't really do that, but in the early years it was easy and helped keep the sales anonymous. Because of course I had my own reasons to want to get rid of the pieces. Why, you ask? Well, let me explain. Imagine, just for the sake of an argument, that you were the type of person that liked to kill and maim other people, to drug them, drag them down to your basement, and then slowly torture and kill them for your own private amusement. Now, I'm not admitting to anything here, or accusing you. I'm just asking you to imagine that you were in that scenario. Now, after you have been fully satisfied and have killed and mutilated your victims in the privacy of your basement, you will need a way to get rid of the body. You can't just keep it around because the smell would arouse suspicion. You can't just drag it out in the dead of night because someone might see, and if you try burying or burning it, people will become suspicious. So what do? How do you get rid of the remains? Well, obviously the first step would be to dismember the corpse, to cut it up into smaller and more manageable pieces, which for a lot of people might be a problem. Luckily, And again, I'm not admitting to or accusing you of anything here. But luckily you have an entire workshop full of power tools that you use for the repairs and restorations you do as part of your antique furniture business. Plus, nobody's going to get suspicious about the sounds of banging or sawing coming from a place that sells furniture, are they? Using those, it would be fairly simple to cut up the body, separating the limbs from the torso, cutting at the joints and severing the tendons to make pulling the bits apart and popping the joints out easier. Once you have all the separated pieces, you then just need to strip the flesh off the bones. As you probably know, that is fairly easy to do with strong acids, or a mix of the solvents and chemicals you use in the restorations. As long as you have a large oil drum to keep the pieces in for a while, and you can cover the smell with the aroma of lacquer and furniture polish that customers actually say they love, the process is fairly simple. Now I know what you're thinking. Once you've done all that, once you've followed all of those steps and stripped down the carcasses of your victims, you would still, hypothetically, and of course we are talking hypothetically, you would still have the bones to deal with. Well, that's true. You could burn them to ash, but again that would cause problems in terms of attracting eyes to your little hobby. Plus, what they don't tell you at the crematorium is that bones don't really burn all that well. When you get your pile of ashes that used to be Grandma Mabel in a little urn, that isn't because she burnt up. Most of those remaining bones have been collected after burning and powdered down in a big machine. They aren't burnt down at all, but ground to dust in a big mechanical blender. You don't have the equipment or the time to do that, especially if you keep stacking up new victims at the rate of about one a week. So, instead, you get rid of them another way. You take them out from the acidic soup in the oil drum, leave them to dry and harden again, then polish them gently with a sander and some preservative chemicals, the same way you would an antique piece of ivory. Then, after taking very specific measurements, you get creative. You hollow out the legs of an antique table so that there's just enough room inside for some new packing material. You make a small compartment in the bottom of an old wardrobe or in the back supports of a beautifully carved chair. You carefully replace the polished mother of pearl inlays on a coffee table with pieces of finely polished tooth enamel. Or you take great pride whilst inserting 14 separately dried femurs inside the lengths and struts of an 18th century wooden bed that you know someone will one day sleep on. Then, you never say a word. When your friend gives you a heads up about Craigslist, you get rid of stuff you don't want anymore by advertising it at a ridiculously low price and shipping it out all over the world. From desks with pieces of skull in the worktop to chairs, each with a pile of finger bones and vertebrae holding up the legs, you scatter the remains and the pieces they are now part of to the four winds, to over 870 separate locations over the last 5 years. Though of course that's not even counting those people who will have bought the items from you, then immediately resold them for profit, sending them God knows where with God knows who, owners who might themselves sell the pieces, and so on and so on. Tracking them would be almost impossible. Once you've done that, you just relax, knowing that it'll never be traced back to you. You smile to yourself, knowing that somewhere a family is sitting down to dinner at an expensive antique table, in the fabric of which are the remains of a life you snuffed out with your own bare hands. You sigh with satisfaction as another customer, a young woman, alone and browsing the pieces, wanders into the store, never knowing that she could probably pick up similar pieces on Craigslist, or that if she's lucky, she might even be able to add her own very personal contribution to restoring one of these pieces before it's sold on to yet another satisfied customer.